Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order, please. It is 6:32. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Oh, sorry.
I distracted him. I'm sorry. It was my fault.
Vulcan? Carter?
Here.
Cowart?
Present.
Esri?
Here.
Furtado?
Here.
Goss?
Here.
Harper?
Here.
King?
Here.
Lakshan? McGuire?
Here.
Michaels?
Here.
Pasalacqua?
Here.
Paul? Rodriguez? Storr?
Present.
Straub?
Here.
Summers?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Thorsland?
Here.
Benich Theronot?
Here.
Williams? Patterson?
Here.
There's a quorum. Would you join me for the prayer? Father, for the strength you've given me, I thank you. For the health you have blessed me with, I thank you. Let me use these gifts to do the work you have for me to do in my very short time here on this earth. Amen. Okay, this is National, I'm sorry, I was just going to mention, this is National Counties Month, so you do have buttons on your thing for if you want to take a couple with you, that's great. And now please join me for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please read the notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on April 21st, 2022, 6:30 p.m. in the Shields Carter Meeting Room, Brookings Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees, and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thanks, Matt. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Michaels.
Thank you, Michaels. Second,
I have a
Straub.
correction.
Ms.
first.
Straub. Okay, there's correction. Mr. Thorson?
Yeah, the date for the study session is April 26th, which is a Tuesday, and on the agenda, it's listed as a Thursday.
Okay, so that should be changed to Tuesday?
Correct.
Okay. With that change, any other corrections? Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next is the date and time of our regular meetings. You can see the standing committees and the committee of the whole, and the county board will have a study session, which will be on April 26th. That's probably where the April 26th came from. It is Thursday, but it's supposed, I'm sorry, pardon? It is it is Tuesday. That's why I say we changed it to Tuesday. Right there also, Tuesday, April 26th. Okay. Any public participation this evening? We have Susan Monty.
Hello, Susan Monty attending this evening to represent Champaign County Environmental Stewards, or CCES for short. The CCES request is for $650,000 of Champaign County's American Rescue Plan Act funds. This amount will provide needed upfront funding for a CCES capital campaign project to establish a household hazardous waste collection facility in central Champaign County. Thank you for considering this request for ARPA funds. I'll be here for the rest of the meeting in case you have questions.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Any other public wish to participate tonight? Did you fill out a slip for me? Okay. That's okay. You can go ahead and speak. Can you push your button? Push in the middle of your speaker, push the.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nicholas Dale. I am a resident of Champaign, Illinois. I've got a couple of, do I have a time limit for this? 5 minutes, okay. It won't take that long. The main issue I want to address tonight is why are the assistant state's attorney's labor being exploited? There's only 4 names at the state's attorney's office that make 6 figures. There are many more names at the sheriff's department that make 6 figures. If the state's attorneys can't even negotiate their salaries to reflect what they're worth, how can we expect them to effectively negotiate the laws in the courts? I suggest we defund the sheriff's office and pay the attorneys what they are worth. They didn't spend 8 years obtaining a higher education to be exploited. They're sheriff's deputies that don't even have a college education. It's time we change and get with the rest of Illinois. We the people wanted change, so the General Assembly passed HB 3653. It's time our local municipality does the same. Secondly, since we hopefully will be paying our state's attorneys more, we the people need them to identify themselves when asked at the courthouse. The government is required to be open and transparent so we may hold the corrupt public officials accountable. I already have the names of 18 attorneys from the state's attorney's office. It is publicly posted on the county's website under General Information, Freedom of Information Act, employees with total compensation over $75,000. According to the American Bar Association's 4th edition 2017 of the Criminal Justice Standards for the Prosecution Function, Standard 3-1.7, Conflicts of Interest, lowercase j, some misconduct instances require recusal of a prosecutor. If years go by and a citizen forgets the prosecutor's face, how can the citizen have justice if the prosecutor is supposed to be recused? However, if the citizen writes down the prosecutor's name and a conflict of interest arises, the citizen can substantiate that in the event the prosecutor is wrongly appointed on the case. With that in mind, I publicly ask that we draft and vote on an ordinance that the attorneys that work in the state's attorney's office be mandated to identify themselves when asked at the courthouse. Remember, all but a few court cases are open for public viewing. Therefore, a prosecutor's name is easily discovered by sitting in on the public cases. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you want to fill out one of those slips there, that's fine, or I have written your name down, so it's okay. That's okay. Thank you, Nicholas. Any other public wish to speak tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'm closing public participation, and we're moving on to our presentation for this evening. Tammy Ogden is here to give the first half of the annual report to the board from the executive's office. This is the Champaign County 6-year financial report and forecast.
I want to start out tonight by saying that I'm actually really excited to give this forecast. It's been a pretty tumultuous couple of years, and I survived, you survived, we survived. Preparing the forecast this year was like a walk in the park compared to last year. And so I also want to just let the board know, also County Executive Kleppel, our elected officials, our department heads, that in March of 2020, when the pandemic hit, we asked for our elected officials, our department heads, to restrain spending. We weren't certain if we were going to get federal or state support at that time. We asked for them to defer capital purchases and to hold positions vacant until we could get a better understanding of how the pandemic was going to affect county finances. And they came, to the table and did that. We ended up getting $1.3 million in CURE funding in fiscal year 2020, and we actually ended that fiscal year, as you know, that audit is completed, with that amount and a little bit of extra. So we were able to take our full CURE allocation and add it to our fund balance, putting the general fund in a better position. When I put together the fiscal year 2021 forecast, I said to the board that the economists couldn't even agree on what it was going to look like coming out of the pandemic. And I felt that it was best for the county to take a conservative approach, and basically we cut every revenue line that we thought would be impacted by 20%, which I said I thought was probably more conservative than we needed to be. But this board supported that decision. The elected officials and department heads prepared their budgets. We had a balanced budget. And we ended up coming out of that fiscal year with a very strong fund balance, allowing us to make a significant transfer to our capital fund, for which we are funding a couple of projects this year. So I just want to say that I appreciate the support of the board, and I never want to go through another year like that again. So we're at the very beginning of the budget process. This is actually the first step in the budget process. And we have legislative budget hearings scheduled for August 29th and 30th. The financial forecast is essentially meant to be a framework for financial decision-making as we start the budget. So the numbers that are in the forecast are still based on several assumptions, and we've got several months of work to do before we're ready to present the initial budget to the board at the end of August. Because future fiscal years in the forecast depend on outcomes in prior fiscal years, if there are deviations in the earlier years, those can carry through to later years. So just keep that in mind. There's still a lot of moving parts here. One of the first things I do when I get ready to put together the forecast is I like to look at Moody's forecast for the state of Illinois. And Moody's will identify within that report different information about the counties that are in Illinois. And I was excited to read what they said about Champaign-Urbana's economy. You can see the quote up here that it is one of the strongest in Illinois and one of the best performing in the region. And related to our workforce, the report states that it has made a convincing comeback, setting it apart from not only the rest of the state, but from the rest of the country. Champaign County's last credit rating from Moody's was done in 2019, and we have a AA2 rating, which is a very strong credit rating. There were 3 things identified in that report that Moody's said that could lead to a rating upgrade. And in fiscal year 2020, Champaign County made improvements in all 3 of those areas. In fact, not only did we make improvements in all 3 of those areas, but in the methodology that is used by Moody's, we made improvements in 7 out of 13 of the categories. So we did ask Moody's to do a scorecard for us a couple of weeks ago, and that's how we know we made those 7 improvements. However, it wasn't enough for us to be indicated as a rating upgrade. So I'm hopeful that with the completion of the 2021 audit later this year, we will again ask for the scorecard to be done, and I'm very hopeful that we will be in a position for a rating upgrade, and we'll very likely ask for a formal credit rating at that time, because that will be advantageous to us before we issue debt, which is expected at the end of this year or beginning of next year. This chart is a University of Illinois flash index, which is reflective of the economy, and it is published on a monthly basis. The green line on this report represents the dividing line between economic growth and decline, and you can clearly see in March of 2020 where the economy took a nosedive and remained below that green dividing line for a year. Economists were in different camps in regards to, again, how we would be coming out of the pandemic, and one of those camps was that it would look like a Nike swoop, and I think this is pretty close to a Nike swoop. But you can see in April of 2021, we broke the dividing line, and then after that month, pretty much rebounded as a state back up to where we were prior to March of 2020. In April of 2022, we actually hit 106.1, which I think is even higher than any of those months reflected prior to March 2020. One of the comments made in this report was that economists were still skeptical, that actually anticipating that there would be some slowdown in the economy in 2022, and so far we have not seen that come to fruition. Level playing field legislation is something you've heard me talk about quite a bit over the last year and a half, 2 years. And the reason that I wanted to present this information to you before I present to you the general fund and the public safety sales tax funds is because this legislation affects both of those funds. So if you need a refresher on what level the playing field legislation did, it essentially leveled the playing field between remote retailers and brick and mortar stores by imposing both state and local sales taxes at the point of delivery. So when we were doing the fiscal year 2022 budget, I had indicated that it was extremely difficult for us to be able to budget for this because we really don't know what the online buying habits of the people in our localities are, and we didn't have any data to be able to use for that. In fact, this April, we have just now fully received an entire year of those distributions. So the legislation was effective in January of 2021, but we didn't start receiving those revenues until April. So now we have an entire year. And we knew with the fiscal year 2022 budget that there was going to be increased and sustainable revenues, and that's why we went ahead and felt comfortable adding those 7 positions back to the general fund that had been cut from the last recession in 2008, 2009, and then also the 2 positions out of one of our automation funds back into the general fund that had been cut in 2016 with budget cuts. So you can see from this chart that 2018 and 2019 sales tax revenues, and this also includes use tax revenues, were pretty level. And you can see the downward trend in 2020, the impact of the pandemic, and then the increase in 2021 and sustained thereafter. One of the other things that complicated the ability to be able to project what revenues would look like is that some of what had been received as use taxes would now be received as sales taxes. So we knew there was going to be a decline in use tax in conjunction with an increase in sales tax, and the increase in sales tax far outweighed the decreases in use tax. Annually, I pull a report from the Illinois Department of Revenue to look at the number of businesses who registered taxpayers in Champaign County. And in 2020, there were 1,230 businesses registered as taxpayers for Champaign County. And I checked a few weeks ago, and there were 4,810 business taxpayers. So obviously, probably the majority of those are remote retailers that are distributing sales tax dollars that are collected within Champaign County back to our locality. So for general fund, let's start with that. The revenues that are reflected here, as you can see, and it may be a little bit hard to see, but you've got a copy in front of you, are predominantly generated from 2 categories, and those are property taxes represented by the dark blue line and federal, state, and local shared revenues represented by the orange line. Federal, state, and shared revenues include our sales taxes, personal property replacement tax, income tax, federal and state grants, AOIC reimbursement. There are a lot of other smaller things that go into that. And one thing I want to mention about income tax and personal property replacement tax is that they also reflected strong performance in fiscal year 2021, and there were some tax loopholes that were closed. For property taxes, which is the second largest revenue category for the general fund, the county is able to capture within its levy growth for inflation, which is reflected by the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, and also new growth revenue that is added to the tax rolls. For 2022, tax year 2022, taxes that will be collected in fiscal year 2023, that CPI set by the Illinois Department of Revenue is 5%. That is the highest that it has been since Champaign County first voted PTEL in back in 1996. And in all actuality, the CPI was 7%, but PTEL caps it at 5%. So from this chart, I just want to point out a couple of things. 2020, there was what's reflected here, a decline in property tax revenues. Was not an actual receipt of fewer property tax dollars. It was when the county was court ordered to pay for the Carr ruling, we were directed by our outside auditor to record that as a revenue reduction on the financials. So that's why you see that decline here. In fiscal year 2021, we reallocated the former nursing home operating levy to the general fund in order to eliminate the $1 million loan that was on the county's balance sheet that we had loaned to the nursing home back in 2018. And then in 2022, we reallocated that former operating levy to the Tort Immunity Fund to make a dent, I guess, in what the outstanding obligations that the home owes to that fund. Actually, I want to go back and mention one other thing about potential liability related to outstanding hospital cases. So there are still outstanding cases, and we won't get into the weeds on those, but essentially, just as a reminder to the board, the county does not have specific funds set aside for an unfavorable ruling in those cases, and any ruling against the county that would require us to have to pay those costs would come from fund balances. In regards to other revenues, one thing I want to mention, and it was in the report if you read the report, is that the bond reform that will be effective in fiscal year 2023 is expected to have an impact on county finances. That is indeterminate at this time what that will look like, but we know that bond processing fees will no longer be collected. And then also 70% of, well, I think that was the number. Let me just say that there is a percentage of bond fees that are collected that then go towards paying for the fees that are imposed against those individuals, that there will no longer be that particular revenue source to meet those obligations. So through the 2023 budget process, we'll have to work closely with the court departments to make a determination about what that impact is going to look like in the county's budget. For general fund expenditures, by far the largest cost to the county is for personnel, and that is represented by the blue line here. And in fiscal year 2022, we expect that we are going to underspend our personnel budget. If you have been paying attention to the HR report that's produced by Administrative Services, you can see why. And I just want to mention, in March, that report had 40 general fund vacancies, and of those vacancies, a significant number of them were in our corrections department and our court services department. There was a report that was conducted last year of state and local governments that identified the increasing retention and recruiting challenges of local governments, and 64% of the respondents identified corrections, jail, and policing as some of the hardest positions to fill. So you know that we are undertaking the workforce study, and I think Darlene may speak a little bit more about that in her report, but hopefully that will give us some insight into some of the things that we can do as a county to make sure that we're in a position to be able to recruit and retain employees. One of the things that you're going to notice with the fiscal year 2023 budget is that with the new ERP, we have the capability to track things differently. So I just wanted to mention tonight that the revenue and expenditure that the county receives that is essentially pass-through revenue to the state of Illinois for our revenue stamps and for our rental housing support program. We will be recording that differently starting next fiscal year, and so we will only be recording in our financials the portion of those funds that the county will keep. Everything else will be recorded to a balance sheet line, as in due to and due from, so that we will no longer have to, well, first of all, that's just best practice. And secondly, it will circumvent the budget amendment that we sometimes need at the end of the year when we end up bringing in more revenue than was expected and have to turn around and pay it out to the state. So just wanted to mention that, and while I'm talking about changes in terms of budget processes, you're also going to notice with the fiscal year 2023 budget that it's going to look different. The GFOA had recommended to the county back in 2016 when it did our business case analysis that we shrink our chart of accounts, and we did. According to the auditor's office, we had over 7,000 account strings, and now we have about half of that. So you're going to see things at a lot less granular level than you're used to seeing them. And we also will be producing the budget book with software instead of manual processes. And we actually had our intro today to the team who will be teaching us how to use that software. So exciting things going on. In regards to expenditures, another thing I want to draw your attention to that's going to be a large cost to the county in fiscal year 2023 is the continuation of out-of-county housing for inmates. So as you know, the construction project is going to take at least 12 and hopefully not more than 18 months. But this forecast assumes that there will be a $1.5 million cost to house those inmates out of county. But depending on what that population is and how many inmates we have going out, that number could flex. Again, we'll have to work with the sheriff through the budget process, determine what that's going to look like. Fiscal year 2024 includes 6 months of expected out-of-county housing at a estimated cost of $750,000. Also, included in this forecast for debt, we have one debt certificate that will mature in 2024. It's a smaller debt certificate, but with the purchase of County Plaza and the anticipation of issuing debt for those renovations, this forecast includes the assumption that we will begin making debt service payments in fiscal year 2023 on a $20 million issue. This slide represents the general fund revenue and expenditure trend and fund balance projection. And if you notice those first 4 years there, it's pretty crazy. And so I just had to throw a little bit of humor in. This is literally how I felt during those 4 years, except for I have white hair, so probably from those 4 years. Anyway, in 2018, you can see the county ended the fiscal year with a very low fund balance, 7%, and that was because we had ended up transferring $2 million to the nursing home fund in order to pay the outstanding accounts payable obligations of the home before the sale in 2020, or I'm sorry, in 2019. And then in 2019, we were able to, after the sale of the home, transfer those funds back and restore the general fund balance. Also in 2019, there were a few other factors that led to the fund balance being bolstered, and that was early receipt of AOIC reimbursement. We also, in that year, aligned income tax and use tax distributions to be deposited at the same time. So we ended up posting 13 months of income tax distributions to that fiscal year. And that was because we were receiving both of those funds at the same time, but they were being recorded on the financials in different months, which actually caused them to be recorded in different fiscal years. And it was just a source of confusion. At that time, there was a lot of volatility in the treasurer's office, and so we just decided, let's get these lined up and make this easier. So that was one of the contributors to that higher fund balance in 2019, which that year we also had underspending and expenditures as well. In 2020, I mentioned earlier, we had the receipt of the CURE funding, the $1.3 million, which went to fund balance, and so you can see we had a little bit of growth in our fund balance there as well. And fiscal year 2021 was last year where we had very conservatively prepared our budget, and our revenues ended up coming in greater than budgeted, and we also underspent that year in expenditures. So ended that fiscal year with a very healthy fund balance, allowing us in this fiscal year to transfer in $3.75 million that we are using for the architecture and engineering cost for the jail consolidation project, and also for County Plaza. And I'm really happy that we did not have to issue debt early in order to get those projects started, and that we can wait until those construction projects start to issue that debt. Future fiscal year forecasts, again, they're a framework. There's a lot of moving parts, and so, you see those fund balance numbers carried through. Those are going to fluctuate based on, actual performance, and there may be some years where if we have a surplus, we, decide that we want to use that for certain projects. One thing I just want to say is that we have a minimum fund balance recommendation of 16.7%, which is 2 months of operating expenditures. But considering the economic environment, what we just came through, also considering the fact that we have some outstanding potential liability, a 30% fund balance, I'm happy with that. So, and many local governments do actually have a 30% fund balance recommendation. So 16.7% is what our minimum recommended fund balance is, but 30% is, what I want to say is part of the reason historically that if you've worked with me for very long, know that I am going to be very conservative in terms of my projections until I feel comfortable. Part of that comes from the fact that historically the county has not had a strong fund balance and is unable to take a financial impact or a hit. So we have to be extremely careful. Okay, moving to the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. I'm mostly going to focus on the expenditure line for this fund because the revenue line is pretty self-explanatory. I mentioned earlier that the general fund includes $1.5 million in 2023 projected for out-of-county housing. $750,000 in fiscal year 2024. Those costs are actually being supported and built in as a transfer from the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund to the general fund. What is not included in this red expenditure line is funding for our justice case management system replacement. And I know that you are aware that the IT plan identifies that cost as much as $15 million, for which we don't have a reserve. In talking to the court administrator, McLean County is actually, they began their justice case management system replacement in 2019, and they're expecting that to be done for 2 years. So they think this is probably at minimum a 4-year process. So some of what you see between that revenue and expenditure difference there could potentially be used for reserve funding for that system. What also is not reflected in the expenditure line here is reserve CARF funding. So we do have current funding built in, but usually through the budget process determine whether or not we have the capacity to put reserve funding into CARF for future fiscal year items that are going to be replaced. Debt service at a $13 million issue is included in here, those payments, which would be semi-annual payments. But if for some reason that issue ends up being greater than $13 million, that would have to also be built in. We do have one bond issue that will mature at the end of this fiscal year, the 1999 bonds, but we won't really see any capacity from that bond maturity because the principal on the 2014 issue kicks in, and so essentially there's no cost savings there. At the end of 2026, the 2016 issue matures, and then at the end of 2028, the 2014 issue matures, and you can see that's that significant drop off there in expenditure forecasts. For our capital asset replacement funds, the two largest funds that support this fund are the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund. And through the budget process, there's movement between those three funds. And the county board, through its IT plan and its facility plans, have been strategically investing in our facilities and technology over the last few years. You can clearly see that from this chart. The IT plan, I think, runs through 2025, so that's something that in the next year or so that the county board is going to want to update with our IT director. And our facilities plan goes through 2030, although I think our facilities director is going to be refreshing that because we had significant amount of work done on our roofs that was planned for future fiscal years, but because of the hail, we are accomplishing last year and this year. The large FY 2022 budget bar is just to point out, that reflects the $3.75 million that I referred to tonight. Also, several large projects that the county had in its capital plan for this fiscal year. The phone replacement and surveillance for Brookins, which both of those are I think going to be deferred with the purchase of County Plaza, but there was funding in the budget for that. And also network upgrades was another large cost that was built into this fiscal year. For the ARP funds, I essentially included this information in the forecast because GFOA has been encouraging governments to include in their financial forecast more than just their general fund. So we've tried to be a little bit more comprehensive the last few years. And this is a, a large source of funds that is flowing through the county. So this information largely, came from Kathy, and I know she's going to talk a little bit about that more. So I'm not really going to go over any of this since she's going to cover that later tonight. And just because I'm so excited about starting the budget, I thought I would put a fun slide at the end. I feel like I've talked forever. I don't know how long it's been, but I will be quiet now, and I guess if it's okay with you, Darlene, take questions.
Are there any questions for Tammy about the report?
Not a question, just a comment. I'd just like to thank you for this. I mean, I know that so much work must have gone into creating such a beautiful, easy to understand plan, for us. And I just really appreciated that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Jim?
I would like to agree with that. I know that you've had a difficult time through this process and trying to maintain the budget, especially with some of us spending or wanting to spend more. Also for the staff too, because obviously they went through this last couple of years of concern about what the budgets would look like. So I really appreciate that work too. Some questions about the CPI and that it's increasing, inflation is increasing. Will you be able to still work your magic to keep this budget going as the cost of labor and materials increase? Will the additional funds keep up with that? When do you think we'll see finally that the nursing home will come off the books and the costs? And then finally, I can't think of the third one. Maybe you can answer those and I'll remember.
Well, in regards to, being able to match revenues to expenditures, we've been very good at that. We've been forced to be very good at that for several years. And we've got, more breathing room, I think, now than what we've had over the last several fiscal years. And so I'm not concerned about that. I think we have been strategically investing, as I said, in our IT and our facilities. We need to strategically invest in our workforce. I think it's going to be a multi-year process. It can't all be done in 1 year.
Okay, and I finally remember the other question. Had to do with the cost of sending people out of the county for jails, and the consolidation of the jail wasn't actually large enough to meet the current population, which I think was 250 or something like that. We're only building a jail for 216. So will the cost of housing out of the county possibly go longer? Because even with the construction, we won't have the space and we'll still have to house out of county.
That's a possibility. I don't have a crystal ball. But it is, I won't say that it's, it won't happen or that it will, but it is a possibility. In regards to the nursing home obligation question, at the end of 2020, we were still near $5 million in outstanding obligations owed to other county funds, and we have reallocated the levy in this year to the liability line, so that will bring that down $1.3 million. We just settled the last case, so I've got to add that back to the list, but it'll still be a few more years before those are paid in full. Almost everything that is outstanding after this fiscal year and that amount going to the liability levy, there's still going to be a little bit left owed to self-funded, and then everything else that is remaining is owed to either the general fund or the capital asset replacement fund. We do currently have a small fund balance in the nursing home fund. We're getting ready actually to receive the third escrow holdback. I had some communication with the treasurer's office the other day, and we've been contacted about receiving that here in the next few days. And we're basically just letting that fund balance kind of stay there because the Medicaid audit is still ongoing. And so there's a potential that you know, even though University Rehab owes us a refund for the PAP, that Medicaid audit could result in even more than what's owed back to us.
How many potential liability cases did you say are still out there with the nursing home?
None.
Okay, okay.
I want to say that I think the size of the jail that we are embarking upon, the expansion, was done in really close consultation with both the sheriff's office and the courts. And while we can't have a crystal ball, I think we got it right. That said, I do think the sheriff has indicated that he might want to accelerate the closing of the downtown jail for a lot of different reasons. They're having a very hard time keeping staff there. They lost more staff. And the amount of overtime we're paying to keep that facility open is astronomical. It's not a safe facility, and I think it is our job to make sure that both the people that are in our care and our employees have a safe working environment, both for their physical safety and their mental health. That said, if we did decide as a body to accelerate that closing, particularly in 2023, you'll see on Tammy's chart, there's actually in public safety sales tax a very small, like 50,000 or 53,000 negative. That's the worst year in that fund. So where I think we might be okay in 2024, I don't think we'd be okay in 2023 if we move to accelerate, and I don't think that we will be okay. We already know that we don't have enough money this year, but I think that's going to be a tough conversation that we have to have, and it's a conversation, that we need to have as a body over the next couple of months. But I do think that, particularly for those 2 months, and particularly for that fund, and then of course the general fund and how those two funds work together, that might be something that would impact this a little bit further. I don't want to get too far into the weeds to that, but I did want to throw that out there, that's one sort of looming thing that could be significant and be a significant impact. But because of the good work that Tammy has done, making sure that we've been conservative and making sure that we have that ability, I think we do. And it's something that we should consider seriously.
And just, I really didn't talk about it too much, but for fiscal year 2022, the budget was prepared with a $3.75 million deficit that was strategic, right? So preliminary analysis of how we're going to come, out of 2022 actually shrinks that deficit. So we do anticipate underspending, right? And revenues thus far are projected to come in above what's budgeted. So we've got that capacity there as well.
Mr. Goss?
Thank you. In your 13 million of bond issuance, what did you use in your budget figures for interest on bonds?
I used what the municipal advisor had provided us, which I know had a cushion in it. May not be enough. I think it was 2.83. So it's, depending on when we issue and, what the economy looks like, and what our credit rating is, that number is subject to change.
Thanks. That's close enough. That's
2.85.
okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Okay, next on our agenda tonight is the approval of the consent agenda. Can I get a motion? Mr. Goss, over here, who spoke? Ms. Van Nitsch, I'm sorry, there is no discussion. Roll call, please.
Carter,
Yes.
Cowart, Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Passalacqua,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes?
Vintage Cernat,
Yes.
Pedersen.
Okay, motion carries. Ready for communications? Does any member of the board have a communication this evening? Mr. Storr?
Thank you. Chances are Susan Monte would have said something about this, but the residential electronics recycling is scheduled for May 22nd, and she may correct me, but I think that there's still likelihood that you could sign up for it.
Okay. Ms. Vintage Cernat?
Yeah, in anticipation of that closing for applications for the cemetery boards, I did forward that information to the local genealogical society to see if there's any interest among their members in applying for those boards. I feel like that would be a really good population because they already have an interest.
Okay, seeing nothing else, we now are moving to approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of March 24th, 2022?
So moved, Lakshan.
Ms. Lakshan? Ms. Carter? Discussion or corrections? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. We're now to standing committees. The summary of action taken on April 5th, 2022, meeting of the County Facilities Committee is received and placed on file. I just want to make a note here for the members of the public that might be listening and interested that the current topics at this particular committee include regular updates from our staff and architects regarding the consolidation of the county jails and the planning and renovation of the County Plaza building. So if you're interested in those topics, that would be the meeting to attend. Next, the summary of action taken on April 7th, 2022 meeting is received and placed on file. Would the elect chair make the committee's recommendation for item 1?
I'd be happy to. I would entertain a motion for adoption of Resolution 2022-83, authorizing intergovernmental agreements for assistance with water infrastructure projects. We have before us, I'm going to delve into short discussion so that we get this right. Before us, an updated spreadsheet that I have a further update, thanks to Diane, who spoke to Stephanie and I right before the meeting started.
Eric, can I get a second first?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you.
And then I will continue.
Second, Ms. Michaels? Okay,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Diane. Thank you, Diane. I'd also like to thank everyone who came to the study sessions for this. We started this project a while ago. We're directed at the 4 rural districts. In particular, we had a lot of input from a lot of people. We sat in this room alone, myself, and we did it on Zoom. That's how long ago it's been now that we've done it. We had a very energetic and long ELOC meeting on the 7th. I want to thank Aaron for being able to communicate to us what the rural representatives were interested in. That was a huge help in sort of distilling this down to what we could do. I will say again, one more time, that we would do more if we could afford to do more. Hopefully we get the second installment of this, and maybe we can allocate some more things. These were all situations, for the most part. They were things that have lingered for literally decades, not getting done. I was contacted by the newspaper, the reporter was shocked that there was villages in Champaign County that didn't have sewer systems and didn't know how that happened. So I mentioned to them that things like PTEL, which we just heard about, and lack of investment in capital projects causes all of this to happen. And so we're very, very fortunate to have been given this money from the Democrats in Congress and the Democrat President, Joe Biden, to be able to spend this money to do things that should have been done for the past 40 years in some cases. We have a water tank that's from the 60s that we're going to help with. So without further ado, I just want you to remember that this green money has a big blue D on it, and that we would do more if we could. and that the best way to get more of this money is in November to vote for every Democrat on the ballot, because that's how we're going to get more of it. We need the BBB bill and more infrastructure. So let's spend it. And I know that sounds political, but the
Yeah, it's
Republicans
not
made this.
appropriate at county board meeting to.
This is absolutely
to
political.
push
Not a single
Democrat.
Republican voted for this money. So we did
They
not make
paid
this
it.
political.
They paid the taxes too.
Eric
That's
has the
fine,
floor,
and we're
Jim.
spending
Okay,
it.
we need to
So,
stick to the topic, please. Let's go down our list of.
starting with District 1, thanks to Jim Goss and Jake out there, we have one project for the whole $500,000, the Sagamon Valley Public Water District. We have an alternate plan recommended by ELOC, thanks to Diane's input, and it is as follows. The Penfield Water District, $70K, Triple Fork Drainage District, $90K, and the Village of Ludlow, $340K, which would make the total of $500,000. And this is what I think we would say is recommended by ELOC now, and with the help of Diane. Thank you very much. In District 3, you see that Ogden has 4 projects. We have directed Ogden for their $200,000 to first focus. The first priority is the Northeast Drainage District. The second would be the rail to trail drainage. And then to follow up with the other money, that's $200. Village of Royal, $200. And St. Joseph, who came in a little late, but provided us with good information, $100,000, giving us the $500,000 there. District 4, Pesodum had a little change tonight. You saw some revisions in your handout. The numbers remain the same, $75,000 for the Pesodum Consolidated Drainage District, which is not to be confused with the other Village of Pesodum work. $175,000 for Ivesdale, $175,000 for the Village of Pesodum, and $75,000 for the Village of Tolono. Again, this brings us to the $500,000. So that is what a lot of work has distilled down to. And I want to thank everyone who worked on it, and I want to thank all the rural reps for giving direction. And I hope that this all does concrete good out there in the county.
Any questions or further discussion? Ms. Michaels?
I just want to say thank you to the ELEC committee and for everybody for looking into this, especially for our rural areas. We don't have the tax base sometimes that some of the other people in the urban area does. I appreciate also the adjustments. I want to explain that the Village of Rantoul will be going to commit $30,000 of the $120,000 project. That is a conference that I had with the Triple Fork and the Village and myself. So the reason why it changed is that's the amount that they could come up with, and therefore we can actually complete this project by doing the 90. As you can see, I made the adjustment to the Village of Ludlow. So that would make the total in District 2 to $500,000. Certainly Penfield definitely deserves their funds also. So that would touch 3 different rural communities with the money. But I just wanted to let you know that we have a collaboration on some of this to get this done. It's not just all county money. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Harper?
Thank you, Diane. Or Darlene. You're Diane, yeah. And anyway, my biggest question is, how was it set to spend $500,000 on each of the 4 rural districts? I've been told that, the rural part of the county doesn't contribute much to the county economics. That's news to me. So I did a little checking on this. Well, the rural property taxes account for roughly 40% of the total taxes brought into this county. So 40% of 20 million is 8 million, or 40% of the full 40, if you get it, is 16 million. And you allocated 2 million to the county. And as Diane just stated, these small towns don't have the ability to generate the sales tax revenue that they do here in town. I hope in this next 20 million, if it shows up, that these 4 rural districts are considered a little more. I mean, Mr. Dorsey's here from Penfield, very near to me. Yeah, we got to provide water. People's gas leak out there. Well, it was brought up, well, people's gas should be taking care of it. I agree, but that could be in court for years. They need water. I just want to know why, if we're not doing anything out here in the rural area, we account for almost 40% of the property tax revenue. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, we're ready for a vote.
I do have a question for the District 4 people, and I'll support it if this is what you want to do. My understanding is that the Tolono is going to the design work that's already done. So I guess then it's just going to like help them for the future. But the rest of their project is $12.5 million. I guess my question is, I mean, one of the, and I've spoken at length with this about Mr. Goss, like one of the reasons I appreciate the Sagamon is like it's a very clear, concrete project with a very specific phase. And out of all of them, the District 4 ones, it just seems like we kind of gave like a little bit of money to all of them. Where, and like what Diane just did, right? She moved money to like specifically make sure that a project could be done. And one of the goals that we have to have is that the phase of each project is done within the time frame that we have. And so, and I guess this will come out through the IG. What we're doing right now is voting to let Darlene work on the IGAs. So like, I guess we'll have a chance to revisit them. But can you just speak with confidence that this allocation will make sure that all of these projects have a specific phase that can be accomplished in the lifespan of ARPA money? Do you know what I mean? Because this area, I don't know. That was the only one that kind of gave me pause because like 75, I totally understand Tolono has a big issue. And I totally understand, like, I'm not against giving them money, but it seems like a drop in the bucket. Do you know what I mean? And if the design is already done, is that 75,000 really going to do anything for that drop in the bucket? But I mean, if you say that's what you want us to do, I'll vote for it. That was the only one that just didn't seem, I didn't totally follow the logic of it.
So I can speak a little bit to that, Stephanie. So Kathy has worked with each of these proposals to see that they can identify a phase that will be completed by 2024, which is when the deadline would be for us for this. And this vote tonight actually does authorize me to sign IGAs for this amount for these projects. Yeah.
So we don't have to.
It will not come back.
No, and let me be clear, like, I understand that Tolono, the phase will be done, because I think the design is, like, already done, or is about done. But then will that 75,000 actually make any difference on the other phase? Do you know what I mean? Like, for the next thing, because it's like, I don't know.
I had more hands-on with the
Yeah.
Pasodum, and the issue was exactly to your point about the timing and could it be spent in time. So I can't speak to as much detail as Darlene can about the Tolono project, but I know that's what we ran into with the Pasodum projects, was having it at the right time.
I'm sorry, I guess that's what I'm saying, like, if we move that 75,000 from Tolono to one of the Pasodum projects, it could make like a bigger difference. Do you know what I mean? I guess, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like getting too far into the weeds. Again, it's not that I'm against the Tolono project. I just didn't know, like, it just seems like we're just like giving them like not very much for a pretty big project.
Well, it's like anything else. Any little bit helps, and we tried to spread out the money the best we could, the money that was available. And I understand, obviously, you want to support sewage and water treatment, so.
I can also say that for some of these projects, they have applied for outside funding, which normally would be used for these projects through money that's available to drainage districts or villages. There's no guarantee that any of those grants will come through. They don't know how fast they can progress. Yeah.
And to Mr. Harper's point, I'd be happy to entertain much, much more for the district next go-round.
Mr. Thorson.
Yeah, on that, Mr. Harper, I appreciate your comments, and Brad following that up. But what we're just discussing right now, this has a timeline, and it has to be spent. So if we get another round, and I would like to see another round of this, we have to make sure the projects that come in are very well defined and can finish within the time. And, good solid things where we can do some good for this. I completely get that infrastructure is a very difficult thing to do in a little town like Royal or Pesotum. But it has to be something that we get done so we don't have to take the money back or give the money back, which would be even worse. So come with solid proposals, and I think we will try to do more with it. And we're really waiting on June to make sure that second check shows up.
And I did get notice today from the state treasury that they are distributing money soon. Okay, are we ready for a vote? Okay, let's vote on this. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. We're now to the Highway and Transportation Summary of Action was taken on April 8th, 2022 meeting, is received and placed on file. And then we move to the Summary of Action taken on the April 12th, 2022 meeting at the Committee of the Whole, is received and placed on file. And now we're moving to a recommendation from the Finance Committee. Ms. Furtado, would you like to make that recommendation? I'm sorry, Stephanie, we're down to the item on finance. If you'd like to make that motion. That's okay.
Adoption of resolution number 2022-84, approving budget amendment BUA 2022-3389, Fund 275, Regional Planning Commission, Department 100, Regional Planning Commission, increased appropriations 50,000, increased revenue 50,000. Reason appropriation to develop an allocation plan for the Urbana Home Consortium's Home Investment Partnerships American Rescue Plan Program Home ARP funding.
Thank you. Can I get a second? Ms. Fenny-Sturnot, any discussion? Those in favor? I'm sorry. So it's a roll call vote, sorry.
Wolken? Carter?
Yes.
Cowart? Esri?
Yes.
Furtado?
Yes.
Goss?
Yeah.
Harper?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Lakshin?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
Passalacqua?
Yes.
Storr? Straub? Summers? Taylor? Thorsland? Fenny-Sturnot?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're down to the policy and personnel. With the policy chair, make the committee's recommendation for item number 1. Mr. Storr?
Yes, thank you. We're playing microphone shuffle here. I'd like to propose the adoption of resolution number 2002-85, establishing and appointing members to the Champaign County Community Violence Prevention Task Force.
Can I get a second? Ms. Cowart? Discussion? Mr. Storr?
Yes, I'd like to commend the members that are going to serve on this committee. Kyle Patterson, Stephanie Furtado, Samantha Carter, Aaron Esri, Jenny Lakshin, Jim McGuire, and Diane Michaels. This is one of the most difficult and pressing matters that is facing our community, and I thank them for their service.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're now down to new business. Can the executive get a motion for adoption of resolution number 2022-86 to establish a place of election for the 2022 primary and general elections? Ms. King?
So moved.
Ms. Lakshin?
A second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion, those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, I think it passed. Let's take a roll call, please.
I'd like a roll call.
Yeah, I need to count, so take a roll call, please. We need to do a roll call. Yeah.
Yes.
Esri,
No.
Furtado,
Yes.
Goss,
No.
Harper, King,
Yes.
Lockton,
Yes.
McGuire,
No.
Mike. No. Passalacqua,
No.
Store. Straub. Summers. Taylor. Thorsland. Nancy or not? Patterson.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Motion carries. Thank you. I haven't always been turning my mic off when other people are speaking. I mean, that's part of the problem. If those of you that are doing that could do that, turn your mic off when you're not speaking. Thank you. Okay, can I get a motion for adoption of resolution number 2022-87, authorizing application for a capital assistance grant for the paratransit vehicles under the Department of Transportation's general authority to make such grants?
So
Mr.
moved.
Esri?
Second?
Ms. Michaels? Further discussion? Mimi is here tonight if there's any questions. Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for coming, Mimi. Can I get a motion for adoption of C&D, resolution number 2022-88, authorizing payment of claims, and adoption of resolution number 2022-89, authorizing purchases not following purchasing policy? Mr. Passalacqua, second. Ms. Cowart, discussion? Mr. Storr?
Yes. Could the coroner explain the expense for the meal, please?
The auditor's here.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, I spoke with the coroner, so I allayed his concern that he was being flagged for an ethical infraction. To be placed on the nonconforming purchases report, you merely have to violate policy. Policy includes procedures. In my narratives for all the nonconforming purchases, this time I've decided to put a little explanation or guidance so that any department head reading it would have a good idea on how to act going forward. The best practices observed by local governments for travel meals is that they're reimbursed at the per diem rate. So because those are already fixed and it doesn't make sense to go through receipts, which are irrelevant, we ask that those travel meals, and this one was authorized, be placed on your own personal credit card, and then when you get reimbursed, you just get reimbursed because of our geographical location, $16 for lunch.
Thank you. I just asked because we've had such a discussion about purchases of meals in the past.
I noticed that that purchase took place 2 days before our February discussion.
Ms. Furtado?
I know that the treasurer is working on a little bit of some more robust credit card rules, and that we're going to try to fold them in as a finance committee into the general credit card thing. One of the things I would like to just say as finance chair is I would like to see an annual required training for everybody who has a credit card. If you work at the University of Illinois and you have a credit card, you have to fulfill an annual required training, or they come and they take your card and they cut it and they throw it in the garbage. I think we as a county should have this similar, just an annual required where folks have to read the rules and, I don't know, take a little test to make sure that they understand them. And I appreciate it. I don't think this is a big deal. He paid it back, but I just think that that would just be a good financial policy for our employees. And it just, especially because as people come in and they're new, that would be helpful.
Any other discussion? Okay, those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We are now down to the semi-annual closed session minutes. I did not, do you have them? Did you pass them? I don't have closed session. I didn't see them. Did anybody else see them? Okay, we're just gonna have to skip this item because I did not get the closed session minutes for tonight. Okay, moving down to the discussion only items. We're down to American Rescue Plan. Kathy, hi.
Yeah, okay. In the packet for this month, we've included the normal list of what we're working on. Currently, the quarterly report is due this month, and it has a lot of modifications from before, and hopefully these are the last major modifications that the Department of Treasury will make into the reporting system. In the packet, we normally include, or have been including, this chart of projected revenues and expenses, and now that we're finalizing the data for the quarterly report, a lot of the actual 2022 expenses column, we have about 14 different categories that'll have numbers in the next report for you to see for what's been spent and reflected on the county financial statements. Those 14 categories are actually different from what we'll report to the Department of Treasury, and one of those categories that'll be different is the revenue replacement category, which you can spend up to $10 million for government services. That's more flexible than the categories that they provide for Department of Treasury reporting. And so we'll also separate that out so that you can keep track of where we're at with that category. For example, the county plaza purchase would fall under that category, and the jail project for the future. So at least $7 million projected in that category already. Other projects, we've been working on the agreements that we already have in place and department purchases and the various stages that each of the departments are at on those purchases. We continue to work on some of those outside contracts for services, whether they're already getting payments or will be in the future. And then currently negotiating additional contracts that we've listed there. And I'm happy to provide any specific updates on those topics of where we're at with each of those projects.
Are there any questions for Kathy tonight? Mr. Esri?
It's on there as to be distributed, but didn't know if you knew anything really about the next step recommendations from the broadband task force. I mean, I realize you aren't part of the task force. I just wondered if you or maybe Darlene know.
I do. I actually was going to talk about that next,
Okay.
so I can report on that. The Broadband Committee has been meeting a few times with the consultant. They did receive the report from the consultant about the initial planning phases. That is now posted on our website under the broadband tab. They didn't have a meeting on Monday, which they were supposed to have. There was not a quorum because county board members did not show up, unfortunately. So they are going to have another meeting on Tuesday to finish that discussion. And then they've realized that in the process of doing this, they need to do a couple of things, which I do need to get your direction on tonight. So they have not completed all the survey type work that needs to happen in order to actually be able to apply for grants in the future. We need to do a statistically significant community survey, and I have found a resource that can do that in the next couple of months. It will involve some money, probably less than $20,000, but it's not budgeted at this time. It's not approved by you guys to move on. They also would like to continue the Finley contract because the next step is identifying, they have the areas identified in the county of where broadband exists and where ISP providers might be located or are currently located, but we need to identify potential partners that are interested in doing work in any of those areas, and Finley would be agreeable to helping us with those. They did give me a proposal to extend their contract for another $28,100. So I'm just, there is budget. We have budget to do this in the broadband section that you guys budgeted. We have plenty of money, but I just needed to bring those forward because it will extend what I've already asked for specific projects. After that point, when we have those two pieces done, then in June, they will be ready as a committee to discuss that and finalize recommendations to the board that will say, here's the plan of how we want to do our model, here's what we think we need, and the best ways to invest the county's money to make those things move forward. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Do you want to say anything else, Samantha? She's the vice chair of the committee.
You pretty much covered everything. I think we do need to stick with Finley. They are very, very personable and also explaining everything step by step. So I think that was a good choice that we made, and I think we should continue on with their services.
Okay.
Thank you.
Eric?
If we authorize, are you looking for a motion to authorize some expenditures tonight?
Yeah, so this is budgeted money in the budget, but I told the board I'd bring back things that were not specifically
Is
approved
it,
so
if,
sign a contract, yeah.
and the Finley amount is?
That amount
is
is fine.
Basically
We already have a
insignificant.
contract with them.
Okay, yeah. Well, then I would strongly recommend that. If you need a motion, I would make a motion to do that.
It doesn't have to be an official vote. If just there's no big objection, I can move forward.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Actually,
And
I have-
then
I have one question on that too. So when we allocated the 3 million to kick off the broadband project, which I also would like to just say is a rural project and should be counted towards the projects that we're doing in the rural areas. We put $1 million in basically professional services and $2 million in build out. We had no idea, but I think one of the reasons we put that much in professional services is because up front there's going to be a lot of easement work that's going to have to be done. Does Finley do that kind of work, or are we going to have to? I mean, my guess is we're going to have to go out to bid. It'll be phased and all that kind of thing. But okay, but I think that would probably be the next step, right? Is starting that because that easement stuff will take years. I mean, like easement work is very time consuming.
To put that in perspective, from being at those meetings, $1 million in the front side seems okay. The $2 million for build out is not even a drop in the bucket. Yeah, absolutely. It's 50 million probably wouldn't be enough, but it's definitely a start.
The $2 million mostly was put in to make sure that we had matching money for state grants, and that is about a dollar amount for the state grant availability that's out there for 2022.
And it looks like there's going to be lots of federal stuff coming to all the communities.
However, you cannot match federal money with ARPA, at least right now, unless the rule has changed. So yeah,
broadband is the exception.
it is?
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. That's the game changer.
Okay, and then the next topic with ARPA related is our housing authority proposals, because the board had asked me to, Kathy and I talked with housing authority a little more detail about the board's interest in getting a specific proposal from them that would have a specific ask, and they've done that. They've given you some proposals and are interested in knowing if you want to pursue any of those going forward. Again, don't need official vote at this time, but I will do an IGA with the housing authority if you approve something. Ms. Furtado.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So first, if, I'm correlating these charts back and forth, under the revenue and expense projections for the housing, for affordable housing assistance, there's $350,000 listed under Housing Authority of Champaign County, but as far as I can tell, we actually have $650,000 left. So I wasn't entirely sure why that amount was 350, and then I believe you also referenced 350,000 in other communications with me. So I just wasn't sure why that was the dollar amount that was there instead of the whole 650,000. Because as we enter into this conversation, I just want to make sure that we all know the dollar amount that's available.
Isn't there 150,000 of that million, or that 600 is gone to see you at home,
So a million, yeah, and then 250, so that's
250 to the
four.
land bank? That's the affordable housing,
Four.
correct?
So I
Was-
guess you're right, so there should be
Yeah,
six,
there
not
should be,
650,
yeah,
six.
it was, there's the subtraction error, I think.
Well,
Okay,
we
so-
used to have 500,000 for the land bank, so that's probably the part of the adjustment to,
Okay.
that, yeah, we would need to update now with the land bank down to 250.
All right, thanks, Jim. I apparently can't do math. Six. So for the housing authority thing, I would just like to kick off. I really appreciate that they put this together. I think I would probably be more interested in, this is just my opinion, the tenant damage reimbursement, the supportive service, and the emergency shelter for families. The incentives for area landlords, I'll just be blunt, I have a hard time incentivizing people for something that they should already do. But more importantly, House Bill 2775 makes discrimination against income source and something you can no longer do in this state, and it's on the governor's desk to sign. So assuming he signs it, like landlords cannot discriminate against people with housing vouchers. So there would no longer be a need to incentivize them because they can no longer do that. So for me, I think that House bill is going to take care of that. So I think focusing our attention on the other three proposals would maybe make more sense.
Any other discussion?
I mean, I think we need to give Darlene some direction on what of these we want to do as a board, as a body.
Mr. McGuire?
Thank you. I know we're trying to just discuss this tonight, but I don't understand why the process that we're following. I think I asked this question at the COW also, that we're given this information tonight. Why isn't this going through the COW, explained, so we can question people about some of the information that's here? You talk about $450,000 being available. They list a total request of 1.1 million. When we say we're going to move forward, I don't think I'm clear on what we're exactly moving forward and what we're going to support. So I can't say, yes, I'd like to do all this. And say, I look at some of it, that makes a lot of sense. But without a real discussion, real understanding from the people of what they're going to do and what they're expecting, I just can't support it. I can't support something I don't know that I'm supporting. Thank you.
Yeah, Lily was not able to come tonight, but if you'd rather wait to the next meeting and talk with her. Oh, I'm sorry, there you are. There she is here after all. I'm sorry, Lily. Come on up and answer questions. Lily is the director of the Housing Authority, for those of you that don't know her.
With me, who is our deputy director for the Housing Authority of Champaign County.
I guess I can answer. Go ahead. Okay. Some of the questions I had is where you came up with these figures and amounts for moving, Opportunity Incentive Program. It talks about the increases in the number of Section 8 vouchers, and you used a term, I should have highlighted it, of the increase in the number of people from 2018 to, if I can find it in here. Oh, here it is. It went from 168 vouchers in 2018 to 216 in 2021. And I see that as like 16 a year. So I'm trying to understand, are you expecting that many more vouchers each year? How much does it really cost? And the expectation is every one of them should expect to cost this much money as an incentive for landlords to accept the vouchers, and then the $1,000 cost. I have the same kind of question except in reverse that Stephanie has. That why are we incentivizing damage in a property? I mean, I think we should pay to support landlords that rent, but what happens to the people that damage the property with their Section 8? You know, I have those sorts of questions. I mean, that's why I think it should go through a CAL where we have a real opportunity to go through and ask these questions. But can you try to maybe
So I
address some of
can-
those?
I can speak to the source of income side, and then I wanna let Tamika talk about the voucher increases. So yes, source of the House Bill 2775, protecting source of income did pass. The reason why we're still requesting landlord incentives is because it's still going to be an uphill battle to get people housed. Urbana has had source of income protections for a very long time, and landlords still choose not to honor it or still choose not to allow people to be housed. So we're asking for landlord incentives because it's one tool to get people housed quickly, as opposed to having them out searching. And Tamika has some data about the search time that it takes for people when they have a voucher and they have housing and assistance, but landlords aren't willing to accept them. Or we have landlords who have low-grade properties or properties that aren't safe, decent, or sanitary that are willing to accept the vouchers, but the landlords who have more nicer properties or decent properties choose not to accept those vouchers. And so then we get into the issue of concentrating poverty over and over and over and over again. And so that's why we're asking for a opportunity area-based landlord incentive to be able to push people outside of the commonly oversaturated areas into higher income areas to kind of spread some of that out. And then Tamika, can you speak on the voucher increases?
The numbers that you were seeing on the voucher increases for that 186 to the 216, that's still saying that on an annual basis, we did 186 of the new admissions for 2018. 2019, we saw a slightly little higher. 2020, even through COVID and things like that, we saw an increase in those vouchers. We're expecting to see even more for 2022, just because of the timing of the Ford County vouchers that we did receive. We absorbed their voucher program, and so the Ford County residents are now allowed to move into our jurisdiction, which means we're going to need more landlords to be able to help those participants out as well. And then, as Lily stated, trying to get them not in just so many concentrated high poverty areas. We need to, so that they can have areas of opportunity for transportation, jobs, and things like that. There's plenty of studies that show that, if you kind of spread some of them out and things like that, that they can also do better. Some of the generational curses and things like that sometimes happens and spills over. They can end if you go ahead and go into some of the low poverty zones and things like that. And so that's the reason for that landlord incentive piece that's needed.
And then to the tenant damage reimbursement, what we
Lily,
are
could you
asking
talk?
in that, what we're asking in that area is really to help us kind of reduce the stigma that the voucher program has. So a lot of landlords choose not to accept the housing choice voucher because they think, oh, well, if I take a low-income family or a voucher holder, they're going to tear my property up. Well, any tenant could tear your property up. And so we're not even asking for a lot because we know that this isn't a common occurrence. But we just want to have that cushion there for landlords to be able to know that, if in the event that there are damages in excess of the security deposit, that there is a fallback for you. And so, landlords are small businesses as well, and many of them have struggled through the pandemic. And people going through the eviction moratorium and having tenants not paying their rent, a lot of landlords have really suffered. And that's some of the feedback that we as the Housing Authority have received. And so we see landlord incentives as a way to quickly get people housed. Yes, we could put hard units on the street, but that's a long-term plan. That would take many years for us to develop and design and find funding. But one way is to utilize the units that are already out there. And yes, by incentivizing those landlords to take these voucher holders.
Ms. Michaels?
I have a couple questions, and I might be out of sequence here. These items are for discussion and information, yet we're looking for direction, but we're not voting on anything. So
We've allocated money for this purpose in the
Right.
budget, but the specific projects were not chosen.
Okay. And then to my next thing, which is the housing authority here, and I see that the amount is 350, which Stephanie was talking about before, and the amounts that they have total 1.1. So is that what we're trying to do? I'm sorry,
So we've determined that
numbers are
it should have been
flying, folks.
600,000. Thank you.
Okay. And so my thought is the emergency shelter for families would be a primary issue, especially from what I feel. The other thing is, I thought you said that Ford County now, is that what you said? Ford County is also now with Champaign, and so therefore maybe,
Absorb their jurisdiction for their housing choice vouchers, so yes, now they can utilize their vouchers inside of Champaign County.
okay, so this money is still staying in Champaign County, it's not going to Ford County, the people are being relocated to Champaign from Ford. Okay, I wanted to make that clear also, because that's close to
Yes,
me.
and then I would also say, just like to add to that point, the Housing Authority, over the last 2 years, we have worked strategically to increase housing options here in Champaign. So we've done a lot of development. But on top of that, we've increased our voucher program by almost 400 in the last 2 years. And we intend to continue to increase it, and we do have the funding to do so. The issue comes in is that we don't have enough units on the street to be able to put people into housing. But we can increase vouchers and help more people.
Mr. Goss?
Yeah, just one thing to the Ford County. Have you went to Ford County to see if you can get some ARPA money from them? That would be the first ask. Second one is, if we had $350,000, where is it? Where is your wish? What is your desire? If we only have $350,000, where should we allocate it according to what would best serve you?
So no, we have not gone to Ford County and asked for any ARPA funding. It wouldn't serve us any purpose to do it because we've completely absorbed their program. Their program was unsuccessful. So HUD granted their vouchers to us. So those vouchers belong to Champaign County now.
And they'll be using them within Champaign County.
And if we had the $350,000, the most strategic investment right now, the $350,000 would not be enough to renovate the shelter, and we wouldn't want to do a partial renovation if we don't have the funding to be able to get it completed. However, I would say that it is very important. It's one of our top priorities to get that shelter renovated. So that is a top priority. But if we were only given $350,000, I think we would have to be strategic about how we split that up among the priority areas. A good chunk of that would go toward getting the emergency shelter renovated as we search for other funding sources to do so.
Just point of information, 600,000. We still have $600,000 left in housing
It's a
category.
subtraction error on the spreadsheet, Jim. It should be 600,000 left. Yeah. Did you have something, Ms. Carter?
One thing about Housing Authority that, from not my own personal experience, because I didn't qualify, but I did have sisters that was in the program, is that your program helped take people to the next level by having affordable housing, by not having to cover a full rent and worry about daycare and going to further your education, because that's what my sisters used it for. So I will be supporting this. I think that you play a big part in this community to keep families from going homeless. They have your resources to help them through that. So I will definitely be supporting. Thank you. And thank you both for the work that you do in this community. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Straub?
Hi, big fan. I just want to, point out, I'm a housing case manager in my day job, so I work with you all people a lot, and appreciate the work so much. We've got folks who are on Social Security, folks who are on Social Security disability, who get about $840 a month and still have to try to figure out how to pay market rent. And housing vouchers, whew, that is a game changer. This is really exciting to me. I just have a couple questions. When you say you absorbed Ford County's vouchers, is there now a reciprocity, or they just came here and they can only be used in Champaign County? Is that the case, or they can also be used in Ford County now?
problem with Ford County is the lack of landlords.
Okay.
And so when we absorbed it, they had a total of 50 vouchers that they could utilize, and only 2 of them were being utilized
Oh,
because of the lack of landlords. And so we had to absorb their wait list first, which we have done. And even those that came from their wait list have actually leased up in Champaign County
okay.
because of the lack of the landlords in Ford County.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And
I
all
know-
of the funding from those vouchers do return to Champaign County. There's no funding. Ford
That's
County is
amazing.
completely out of the deal.
I'm glad that we were able to take advantage of that.
Yes.
I know that in the last round of vouchers that you got, there was funding for landlord incentives. Have you found, and I don't see that end of it, have you found that to be a specific draw? Has that really helped people to lease up?
I would definitely say yes. When I was looking at even the numbers for how quickly the voucher search time is going now, it has decreased. And I would just think that a lot of it comes from the incentive for the landlord, especially with our EHVs and things that we have going on right now.
Okay, and then I just have one more question. As this really exciting, another game changer, this legislation that's coming up, as this is coming into effect, does the Housing Authority have any means to pursue any kind of action towards landlords who continue to discriminate against people for form of payment?
The Housing Authority plans to educate our tenants during briefings about the House bill that has passed. We cannot take any direct action with landlords. However, we can collect their information and pass it along to the city that it would be responsible for, taking action on landlords who violate this law. So we will be proactive in making sure that clients understand their rights as a tenant. And there are some provisions and different things. There's still ways that landlords, and then that's another thing, there's still ways that landlords can choose to discriminate. Whether they say, well, you have to make 3 times, the cost of rent or whatever. There's still ways. So the bill allows for a landlord to subtract that amount from whatever the voucher would be. So hopefully the bill will be helpful, but we know that there are still ways landlords can get around it. So we are going to be very proactive in educating our tenants and educating our staff and building a list of landlords who do violate the law.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Mr. Passalacqua?
I've had the pleasure of working with Walter. I'm a contractor that's done some work on some of your buildings. With that in mind, I'll have to step away from voting on anything regarding, but I would just like to make the comment that working on your facilities with him in particular, I can see that you guys do a really wonderful job for the community. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Carter?
Can you just explain to me the process of getting the landlord enrolled into your housing authority program to accept the vouchers?
It really is a simple process. Once the participant, our applicant, they have completed a briefing, they'll get what's called a moving folder, and it has the request for tenancy approval and some other documents that a landlord would need to complete. Once we have it back in our office, we reach out to that landlord if we see that they are new, just so we can get the tax forms and things like that, and be able to enroll them into our, so that they can get their money, because everything we do is electronic versus paper. And so we do that, and then they just do a quick inspection. The inspection process, I always say, if it can pass a lot of the city code inspections, housing inspections, usually can pass our HQS inspection. And so then after that, they move in. So a lot of people think that it may be a long, tedious process for the landlord side, but actually it isn't. We sign a HAP contract, which is the agreement between the housing authority and that landlord, and then we'll be able to start payment. We do payments twice a month, and so it's not like a long time that they'll have to wait or anything like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to make one more comment that having been around rentals and construction and so forth for a long time. It's somewhat of a misconception that landlords don't like this, because there's a lot of landlords that really like this a lot, because it keeps their property full. There's somewhat more of a guarantee that the rent's coming. And so I don't want anyone to think that all landlords think this is bad, because they certainly don't. So, yeah, like I say, I support what you guys do, and I'm sad I can't vote.
Ms. Lakshman.
I just had one quick question on the emergency shelter for families renovation arm of this. It looks like you've got some pretty specific numbers down. Was there a study undertaken with a firm to get quotes on that? And would those still be valid, like, I guess, when we would hope to just start work if we were to fund that one?
The quotes that we have on the emergency shelter for families, we're hoping that they'll still be valid, but that $650,000 really won't even scratch the surface. I mean, we're still seeking other sources of funding. We have gone to the city of Champaign as well, so I believe they're going to come up with some type of process as far as how they allocate affordable housing money. So we will be going to them as well, because once we open up the walls, we never know what we're going to run into. So that $650,000 is really just to get us started on the renovations and to really just kind of like hold the floodgates a little bit. And so hopefully the contractors will honor the numbers that we've gotten from them.
Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. I hate to go back to the voucher program again. With the damage reimbursement for the landlords, do you guys have any processes in place to make sure that it's not taken advantage of by unscrupulous landlords?
So, of course, they would have to verify, we would have to verify that the damages are in excess of whatever the security deposit was that the client paid. And if the damages are in excess of the security deposit, then I believe what we wrote is that I think up to 500 or somewhere up to 500 or 1,000 to make those repairs. This can, outside of normal wear and tear, I like to say. So the damage reimbursement is what we're looking for outside of normal wear and tear, not if it needs to be repainted or it needs to, there's a small hole in the wall that needs to be patched or anything like that. We're talking excessive damage that's going to cost the landlord big money. So the money that we're asking to offer really would be miniature compared to what they'd have to spend on the property. So we do intend to develop an inspection program or something along those lines to verify that it is in excess of the security deposit.
Thank you.
Mr. McGuire.
Thank you. And just want to touch base. I really appreciate this program. I appreciate the work that both of you do, or the Housing Authority has done. Job training, all kinds of things to support families. Obviously, the issue becomes how much money we have. Yours isn't the only important program that we have, and we want to try to make sure we can spend as many dollars. You've got a good presentation. There's a lot here to support, and we still don't have a dollar figure to figure out what to move forward to give you direction. And I would like to see these types of things come through the normal process and be better, more defined, so that we better understand it would be in the COW and then bring it forward to the full board so we can make a vote. I realize that we determine tranches of money to be spent in certain areas, but it doesn't really give us an opportunity to better understand how well maybe other organizations will be able to perform the required work that they're going to do, whether they have staff, whether they can do it in a timely manner. Of course, the Housing Authority is not going anywhere, thankfully. But in other cases, it may not be so simple. And I thought we were going to have that opportunity to do that with this money, even though we set tranches of money for specific areas. So I still won't be able to move this forward. Thank you.
So the process that was set up so far by the board is that there's not an official application process, but we did set up the specific projects. This was one of the specific, the Housing Authority was specifically named as a project. The idea was that they would come up with whatever things were the most useful they thought in meeting all of the housing continuum needs in the community. And so this is what they've done. The other monies that were not specifically designated to a specific agency are being handled through ELUC for the water projects, and then the task force that was set up for the violence prevention. Those are the ones that have pots of money that are in a category, but no specific agency allocated. So that's why this one's different, Jim, it's coming directly to this group because there wasn't a task force or committee or something that was assigned to do the further investigation into what this, that it was specified for the
Can I
housing
address
authority.
those issues, please?
Sure.
Obviously, this Justice and Social Services Committee is like ELUC, and so those programs can come through there. That as a county board, we haven't determined a process, an application process. That's our fault. That's not the organization's fault, and we should do that as a county board if we're going to have a process to spend almost $40 million. So while I understand your points, it's still, we have a process for spending money in the county. We have committees to do that with. We need to follow that organizational process. Thank you.
Stephanie?
So, to address Jim's point, the reason we put the ARPA discussion on the full board instead of the COW is just frankly, the COW meetings are usually pretty long. And so we put it on the full board instead of the COW so that we could have more time to talk. Because the thought process was if we had it at the COW, people would be burnt out from all the other stuff we discussed at the COW, and we wouldn't have as much time to talk. If you all as a body want us to put this stuff back on the COW, we could totally do that. Those meetings will be longer. We just kind of divided it up. That was the only reason. To the point about applications, I mean, we could have an application process, but there were specific projects that we as a body we had all those study sessions, and then we had a budget meeting where we identified some specific projects that we wanted to do. So for example, we had, broadband, specific project that we wanted to do. Keeping people in place with the rural housing. We thought that was a good proposal that came to us. So we said, Darlene, go forth and get that done. Housing Authority, we said, we want to give them money, right? And so we said, Darlene, go forth and get an idea of what that money could be. So I do think now there's some places where it's tougher, where we knew we wanted to spend money on those issues, on preventing gun violence, on small business. And so we have set up committees to address that. We're going to have a study session and a committee in order to get to that point where we're like specific things. But in this category in specific, really, truly, we were like Housing Authority and the land bank keeping people. We did do one quick course correction because the issue with CEO at home came up, and we all thought that was something worthwhile to do, right? So if y'all have issues with the process, you let us know, and if you want us to move it to the COW instead. The one deal with ELUC taking the water projects as compared to Justice and Social Services. Justice and Social Services is in the COW. So that just would make that meeting longer, and we could do that. That's fine. To that end, I'm going to throw out, and so the idea was to have a conversation. We don't have to finish the conversation today. We could talk today and have it next month, although I do think probably they'd like us to start going, and it takes a while to get all this set up. I'm just going to throw out a suggestion. This is just my suggestion, and y'all could throw out other suggestions if you want. I do think several people have mentioned that the emergency shelters for families, one of the things I think that is advantageous of that is this is finite money. And so for programming type of money, we could put an infusion in, but then it goes away. And so I think doing that, like a bricks and mortar type of thing, and I know you mentioned one of the things that isn't addressed in this proposal, but is expanding the actual bricks and mortar where vouchers are attached. our intention is to put more money in this category in future years. And I'd love to see, I know we got a proposal from some outside folks, but obviously we want to know your opinion, but like, I'd love to see that in the future. I hear what you're saying about the landlords. I think I still have a hard time incentivizing people not to break the law. But to that end, so here's my suggestion. I also want to say we have $2 million of unallocated money from this fiscal year. It's currently on the county side under, I don't know, architecture services, but it's not allocated. It's just sitting there. My suggestion, and this is just my suggestion, is we put $675,000 to the housing authority, $650,000 that they need to do the emergency shelter, and then try to give something to the landlords, $25,000 for the fixing the building type of thing, because we could do those two, and then take the additional $75,000 from that $2 million that's just sitting there. So that would bump up the housing one by $75,000, which is a little bit, but I think that that's super doable. I don't think we're going to spend that other $2 million just this year. We just aren't. So that would be, that's just my suggestion. Not that I think the supportive services is great, and maybe we could revisit that when we have the committee on preventing community violence, because I think it falls under there. But that's my suggestion, is that we give them $675,000 in those two categories, because that's something we could do right now. But if folks have other ideas, if they want to divide it up, please say what you think.
Further discussion? Ms. Michaels?
I agree with Stephanie to a point here. I definitely see the emergency shelter for families rehab done. That's listed at $650,000. I don't know that that figure is going to be $650,000 anymore. It probably will be more than that. And I would like to see that $675,000, if you be it, to finish rehabbing this shelter, because I think they're going to need it. I really have a problem with tenant damage reimbursement. That's kind of difficult. I understand, but if you're only giving them $500 or $1,000, that's not going to fix a whole lot. Where we could have a nice shelter with what it needs and be done with it.
Any other comments? Mr. Patterson?
I will say, when it comes to supportive services, I do think that that is something that is really critical. When they put out vouchers that they're not able to fill, I mean, we're talking about over years, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that our community is missing out on because of the barriers that people are facing. I, like Jen, am also in my day job a housing case manager, and just like the idea of thinking about this outside of work hours is making me sick to my stomach. Thanks a lot. But no, it is really a hassle. I mean, we're talking about people who have utility debt, people who, you know, don't have application fee money, people who, you know, are on SSI disability and make $841 a month and they're supposed to pay a $1,000 deposit. You know, do the math on that. And I think that, you know, what it comes down to is that what winds up happening is obviously the person doesn't get stability, but then also our community is missing out on a lot of money. So I think that investing in something like that is, it's going to bring in additional dollars to our county if we invest into those types of services. So I would be really hesitant to kick the can down the road on that one, but just want to put that out there.
I would like to just say, as Mr. Furtado said, as far as supportive services, I'd agree. I mean, of course, that goes into affordable housing 100%. But I'd also agree that as far as gun violence reduction and looking at the impact that stable housing has on some of the factors that cause violence and gun violence or domestic violence, I think that would be another strategic investment as well, whether the money was granted to the Housing Authority or any agency to provide supportive services for families. In addition, I know that some members have some concerns about the landlord incentives and incentivizing landlords for doing what they're supposed to do. But I attended the study session for affordable housing that the county had. I can't remember what month it was. But one thing in specific that has been a huge advocacy point for myself and every staff member at the Housing Authority now is the racial dot map. And when we pull up that racial dot map and we see the concentrated areas where Black and brown people are kind of redlined to, and then you layer that with the voucher map, and then you layer it again with the crime map, the problem exists. You know, you see the problem clearly. And so as the county is considering ways to transition people out of these poverty-stricken areas and reducing gun violence or crime in the communities, incentivizing landlords to take them or finding some creative way to move people out of the over-concentrated areas is one way to get that done. And that's not a Lily thought or a Tamika thought. That is research. So that's what research says. So I think that's one way for the county to consider making some strategic investments.
Ms. Furtado?
So Kyle, just to I totally appreciate your comment. So just to make sure I understand it, are you asking that like to adjust that proposal that I made? I mean, I think that I would like them to come back to the Community Violence Task Force, and maybe we could fund it out of some of that. But I don't know if, so would you prefer that we do it now and reduce, you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess my question is I put out a proposal, do you know what I mean? Like, would you prefer a different direction, which I'm totally open to?
What I will say is, Ed has decided first, I do agree with Mr. McGuire on this. I find it really difficult to have this conversation and decision on the same night. Sometimes it is helpful to be able to have that conversation and then a week and a half later, come back and make the final decision. It's a difficult process. I'm not faulting anybody. You know, there's no perfect way to do it. You know, I'm gonna have 4-hour-long cows. Yeah, no, I hear you that this is something that, and really a great point, Lily. This is something that could be done through that process as well. I just hope that it's something that we can just keep focused on and keep this one on our radar. And as far as, I mean, that process, I feel like I'm being vague, the anti-violence task force.
Mr. Storr?
Thank you. Thank you for coming and for elaborating on the proposals that you've made. And I agree. I think trying to get people out of some really bad situations and transition them, including the supportive services, which I think are important, is a key to helping people, lifting them. Now, I'd like to pose a question to Dr. Furtado. If we take some money out of the architecture fund for is that still what we're considering here, taking some money? Okay. I'm concerned because we know that we're under a bit of pressure right now. Is that money or sufficient money going to be available to provide those services when needed? I don't see. Could you please elaborate?
Yes, all of our architectural design, both for the jail and for the county plaza, are paid for, not through ARPA, are paid through for CARF. It's paid for by that 3.7 million that we took out of the general fund surplus and put into CARF. So we're okay with that. We don't. And Darlene gave me figures on some of the other county board projects that we approved. County side projects are coming in a little bit higher. I think one of the sheriff's office, some of the scanning, but all of that combined, we actually have about just under $2.3 million from 2022 allocation that is not specifically allocated for any specific project or category. It's just sitting in the county side money. Right now, we anticipate the overages to be around $264,000. Even if we're wrong, even if we're half of it is, we still, we have at least $2 million. I'm not advocating that we spend all the $2 million on public side projects, but I am saying that we do have money to play with. When we put these money into these categories is our best guess. So what I'm saying is if we want to go a little bit over on housing, we can, right? We have the ability. So that's all. And I also want to say, like, if y'all want to continue to ponder this in your hearts and come back in May, we can do that as well. We don't have, I mean, at some point we just have to give Darlene direction, because then she has to do an agreement with each group, and we want to keep these projects moving. If this is something you all want to think about more, that's totally fine. We could totally do that. Yeah, I mean, the clock is ticking on all of this, right? I mean, I don't know that a month is going to make that much of a difference. It might on a construction side thing, but again, if you want more time to think about it, we could totally have more time. If you want to move portion now and have the rest of it go to the preventing gun violence thing, that's totally fine too.
Ms. Carter?
I would like to see the full 1 million go to Housing Authority. I would. If we got it to, I would I think that, because it's not like they can't use it, and it could be done in the allotted time, the 2 years. I would like to see that number go up. Thank you.
Ms. Straub?
I would like to just second Ms. Michael's idea of, was it 625 now? 675. Sold. 675 now, with the idea that, as Kyle said, we could talk in the task force about supportive services being, community violence prevention, because obviously people are safer when they are stably housed. So that's where my heart is right now.
Ms. Lockshin?
I was looking back at the bucket that we had allocated for housing, and it looks like we have, with the $1 million and the 250 that's already gone to the rural, I can't remember the name, sorry, it's getting long, and the 150 that's already gone to See You at Home, that leaves the Housing Authority that we had talked about allocating this $1 million to. They have a proven track record in the community. There is a plan in place for this emergency shelter. It looks like we could easily accomplish that within the bucket that we had already established for housing assistance, and I would be very comfortable moving forward with that plan as well.
Mr. Summers?
I would concur with both Jen and Diane as far as action taken tonight. I would be fine with the allocation for the emergency shelter for families. Like Ms. Furtado, this is a brick and mortar project. This is something that specifically would easily qualify for use of these funds. And I also find myself surprisingly in agreement with Mr. McGuire, not so surprisingly with Mr. Patterson, that I do think additional spending certainly may require, at least from my end, a little bit more discussion about specifically how we're going to spend those dollars, and maybe get a sense of the entire board. Maybe we can all agree on a path forward. But I would be fine at this point with the dollars that Ms. Michael suggested for the rehabilitation of the emergency shelter.
Mr. McGuire?
Thank you. I want to agree with Mr. Summers. And I would like to see the process go through as a normal process. But tonight I would like to move the 675 as Dr. Furtado has talked about, and Diane. So if we could do that.
Just a point of information, just because I feel like we need to give Darlene some grace. The 675 that we're talking about is now all for the emergency shelter. That's where the page that we're all on. Okay, because I just don't want her to have ambiguity onto what exactly it is we're asking her to do. Again, that doesn't mean that we won't revisit the other projects, but just tonight. Okay.
Mr. Patterson?
I don't mean to sound stingy, but they only asked for 650. Aren't we talking about the shelter and the damage?
sorry. I was seeing the figure at 650 for the shelter, knowing the price of materials at this point, and the upcharge on that. I mean, 20% is kind of an easy up, but it might be more than that. Certainly, if it doesn't take the whole 675, which actually in our budget is 600, is what we allocated to them. So we are dipping into that extra money by 75,000 to finish completing the project. If there's any funds left, then we can certainly use that for the rest of their stuff. And once again, let me just say also, I agree that this task force would probably address some of the other issues that they've got requests for.
Yeah, I was just kind of thrown by the 75 number, but yeah, it makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Lakshin.
I think they had also mentioned that there's possibly money coming from the city of Champaign too, and the 650 is just a portion of what they'll need to get this job done. So hopefully with us and with the city of Champaign, 675 will go towards a huge chunk of that renovation.
I think everybody's had at least 2 turns to talk on this subject. Could we sort of take a consensus? Is everybody fine with putting 675 toward the emergency shelter? And then we'll consider other things at a later date. Yeah, nods? Okay. All right, I will move in that direction. Thank you. Now we're down to the 4 new projects for consideration, and there's people here that have been waiting for that as well. So these are 2 projects came from the ELEC committee. That's the Champaign County Farm Bureau and Soil and Water Conservation District proposal for crop cover. And the other one is the Environmental Stewards proposal, both of which came through ELEC because they are related to water pollution and safe, clean water. So do you want to talk to those 2, Eric, just briefly?
Yeah, we brought these to the full board because I think these are better discussed with the full board. ELOC had a lot of discussion on both of these. In particular, the Champaign County Farm Bureau, as you know, they started out with a higher number for the cover crop, and they reduced that, sensing sort of maybe the feel of the ELOC committee. We wanted to discuss that more here. The Environmental Stewards proposal is straightforward. Susan's been really great with this, giving us lots of information. And again, we wanted to bring that to the full board so that we could all talk about it, in particular to have more rural representation to discuss the Farm Bureau proposal. I'll now take off that hat as chair and just mention that as far as the Farm Bureau proposal for the cover crop, I have difficulty with this particular program. I think this is a non-concrete thing. There are multiple ways to fund cover crop that are already out there. I think that if people were tremendously interested in doing this, we would see green fields when we drive around right now, and we don't see those. I have some personal experience with it. You know, I was a farmer for about 20 years and was never incentivized to do it. In some aspects for certification, I was made to do it, small acreage. I think I would like to see this money spent on things we've been talking about all night, which are things you can go put your hand on, that 20 years down the road, you can still go put your hand on it. I think we're going to spend this money. Farm Bureau is going to do a valiant effort to try to educate people to do it. They'll take it. They'll do it for the couple of years they have it. If it tips them over the edge, I don't know that it's going to continue a whole lot because, again, we would see that. So, but I wanted the whole board to have the opportunity to discuss it, and that's why it's here. The Stewards proposal is great. I'd love to see that go forward if we can find a way to do it. It's not only going to meet a need that we know is tremendous in the county. Every time there's a household hazardous waste collection or electronics collection, it's booked out. It's also going to put some people to work, and it does fall under the water category. If we can get all of that chemicals out of the people's garages and sheds and barns, and not dripping into the water supply, I think it benefits everybody, and it's a much more countywide thing. So, and that's all I have for that. I really look forward to the conversation.
And then the two other ones came directly. One is from Promise Healthcare, talking about potential funding for their facility. And then the fourth one is premium pay for the direct support professionals that are in the developmental disabilities field. And you have memos on both of those in your packet as well. Do you want to speak to either of those, Stephanie?
I think it's maybe a little bit hard to talk about all of them together. Could we, if it's okay with you, could we talk about the two ELEC proposals first and then push those?
Yep,
I mean,
that's
just
fine.
because I feel like otherwise it'll be like really confusing.
Okay. Well,
And I also want to say all four of these proposals are things that are currently in no category. So if we are going to fund any of those, these, in my mind, would come from the 2 million that is just sitting there category. So, and again, I as finance chair, I would not recommend we spend that down to zero, because I do think we want to have some flexibility for the county side projects in order to make sure that we're able to do the ones that we committed to doing in 2022. But we don't need 2 million sitting there. So, and can somebody turn off the public participation microphone?
Thanks for noticing. Okay, Mr. Goss.
Yeah, as the only one sitting in this room right now that's done anything on cover crops, I'd like to speak toward that process. Currently have a active cover crop program going on. I know what this is. It's a little frustrating that we have people that are unwilling to talk about climate change every day, and then we bring something forward and they don't want to fund $140,000 to $240,000, a couple of tenths of a percent of $40 million. You know, you're asking, well, the frustrating part about this is not a change of tillage. This is not something simple. This is an extremely costly process with no economic return. It's not really going to do a lot. Long-term benefits, nobody really knows. We see it written in magazines, but we hear it talked about. But what are we really helping out here? We're helping out industries that aren't cleaning up the air. That's what we're doing. We're taking crops to get them to grow, and they're helping soil erosion, which we all want. We've all been doing that for years. And they're cleaning up the air from polluters that seem to want to do nothing. And it all starts with our friends that are in China, which are the worst polluters. We're doing it in the U.S. That's who buys carbon credits. The people who buy carbon credits are those who are not cleaning up the air themselves. So when we're asking for a couple $100,000 for a pilot program, there are some programs out there through the USDA. They're not super plentiful. They're not really easy. Yes, I agree, Eric, that not everybody's going to adopt these because they're not simple. There's nothing simple about it. Nothing at all. It's a complex process. It requires, in a lot of cases, more herbicide use, which nobody seems to want, myself included. We're trying to figure this out. We're starting at ground zero on this. And the sad part is we're trying to fix industry's problem. That's who's buying the credits. And guess what? They're selling for $150 a ton right now. And if we go out and sell our carbon credits, we're going to get about $11 a ton. That's what the open market is. Cost me $37 an acre. I'm going to get 11? I mean, I'm losing every time financially. We're trying to figure it out. So that's what this is this money is to do on-farm research for a few folks in the county to try to figure out. You're only going to get early adopters in this program. The people that are always on the bleeding edge of technology are going to do this. But they're the ones that everybody watches too. And if they figure it out, then you'll have other adopters. but you've got to have some incentive for them to do it because, as I said, I've got a small little bit of equipment, small little project that's only 140 acres. It's very atypical of every farm in this county, but it is costly and it's difficult. So I will support this, and I think we should support it. If you all talk about climate change and how important it is, I'm not saying that it's not important, but I'm saying here's an opportunity to put your money where your mouth is. Thank you.
Ms. Furtado?
So I'll say this, and I know that there's disagreement within my caucus about this, and I totally appreciate that, and that's totally fine. For me, I think Eric, and you know, you and I have probably talked about this a lot. I think we reach different conclusions because I think that we as a country and as a county and as a state should see cover crops. Like we should drive around and see cover crops, and we don't. And I totally think the federal government, Mary keeps telling me, and she's completely right, that that I can't say that guy's last name. She says it right every time. If you actually read the full report, their conclusion is that the USDA should be putting more money into this. And I totally think that they should. For me, the thing that makes me interested in this is the part, and I know that I think Chris helped work on this, is the Nutrient Research and Education Council that this is a research project, that is specifically, we are at an R1 agriculture university. And if we all are in agreement, and we could disagree why this is, I think some of the responsibility, quite frankly, is on the farmers, right? I think every industry, no matter what industry you're in, if we want there to be a future for our children, everybody has to be on board in dealing with climate change. It is the pressing issue of our time. If we can incentivize, and I totally agree that this is a short-term project, just like our gun buyback program is a short-term project, right? I think, but what is exciting to me is that there's going to be some research that's done out of it, and that can hopefully incentivize the state and incentivize the feds, right, in order to push them to make a program that is more doable and that more farmers will get on. And maybe I'm just naive, right? The other thing I want to say is the original project, one of the things too that I appreciate, this has gone through several iterations, is that it specifically is going to allow small farmers to score higher in the application process. And one of the problems, just quite frankly, with a lot of the federal and state programs is that big farmers, just by the fact that they have more resources at their disposal, disproportionately, I mean, if you look at farm policy, big farmers have the most benefit from the federal government. And so if we could do something that addresses the local farmers, I think it's worth trying. Again, for what is a very small amount of money in the overall scheme of things. So I totally hear your point. I do. I just think we reach different conclusions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Storr?
Thank you. I've spent considerable amount of time on the cover crop reading. Thanks to my colleague, Mary King's provided a great deal of information, but I've been meeting with the Soil and Water Conservation people for 2 years now, and among them talking about cover crops. And I actually agree with Mr. Goss. I think that it's going to be the early adopters that are going to pave the way to show the rest of the community how to incorporate this in their farm plan. It just pains the heck for me to see the erosion and runoff, the brown snow, all of this stuff that is diminishing one of the most precious resources that we have it perhaps except for water, the most precious resource that we have in our county, which is the soil. And as I mentioned, I think at a previous meeting, it's etched in the wall of Davenport Hall. The wealth of Illinois is in its soil. It's not much, and that we're advocating, and it's a sore point for some of the of our caucus, and I grind my teeth about it, just like I do when I see that there's incentives given for lots of other things, probably the waste and the recycling people as well. But I think that it's an important step for us to do. It's a rare opportunity that we have, and I support it. Now, one more thing. I attended every meeting except one of the Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force all through 2018, every single meeting, except for the August meeting. One of the recommendations for that protection task force was to divert household hazardous waste from the landfill and from people that pour it down their toilets, throw it into their gutters and sewers, and think it's going to all get diluted and it's not going to matter. And we know it does. Sure, it's a lot of money. And again, this is a rare opportunity for us to take an important step not for us, hardly any of us will benefit from this. You know who's going to benefit from us. Those are our children and grandchildren and their children. And we hope that they'll bless us for taking these important steps to try to preserve and truly sustain our environment for them. Thank you.
Any other comments about that? Mr. Summers?
Speaking to the cover crop portion of this, I've spoken at some length with Mr. Storr. I've listened to Mr. Thorsland and Ms. King. I understand that we do have a diversity of opinions in our caucus as far as moving forward with this. Agriculture is big business in Illinois. There is a lot of money in big business. This is something that eventually certainly is going to be benefiting farmers. And the idea of incentivizing it is somewhat like the idea of incentivizing landlords to take vouchers from people to give them housing when they need it. And apparently we're going to be looking at problems with that once the law passes. However, this is not a large amount of money. This is a pilot program. And I am certainly willing to step forward with a pilot program to see if we can get engagement with farmers in Champaign County to move in this direction. Sometimes change is extraordinarily hard, and if you're not shown the way, you may not be willing to take those steps. So I would be supportive of this portion. Thank you.
I'd like to remind everyone that in Champaign County, we have something that I don't think any place else in the country has, and that is the distinction of best prime farm ground. And I think Eric and I said that word a million times on the ZBA. You can travel all around the United States, and you will not find best prime farm ground except where we're sitting. And so I trust the Farm Bureau and our farmers that are not only on the board that work in this county, that it's in everyone's best interest to be a good steward to our best prime farm ground. And this is our opportunity to start something good right here.
Ms. Furtado?
So, I don't know like how it works to discuss two things at once, but I guess we're discussing a finite amount of money. So I want to talk a little bit about the hazardous waste collection facility. I think if you know that the original proposal was $3 million, and at that point it was just, I'm just going to be blunt, a no-go. I didn't see how we could do it. The one thing that I do think makes this attractive is that specifically that the Illinois EPA has agreed to $275,000 annually for these collection facilities. And I'm just going to be blunt, like a lot of counties aren't going to be in our position to do this. And so I feel if we can move on this, there's a very good chance that we could bring that resource to this county. And one of the things that we've said as a board that we want to do is leverage additional money. And so I do think that this is something that the Muhammad Aquifer Task Force has said that, you know, we need to do. It's something that would benefit actual people in our county. I get that it's a heavy price tag, and my concern is, bluntly, the ability to get the rest of the capital campaign done. But I guess we'll never know if, you know what I mean? Like, and that's one of those things, like, we'll never know if we don't try. I don't know, Susan, if you want to talk a little bit more about it, but I do think having a real conversation about that, and again, we don't have to make the decision tonight, but I do think that EPA thing moves this to the need to have a real conversation about this.
Thank you. The capital campaign is something very important to me. I served on the task force with IEPA and got them to agree to fund the transportation and processing costs for 5 additional facilities. And then a comment made at the end of the whole process was, well, let's wait and see what happens. Will you get one for Champaign County? So I'm pretty dedicated to making the capital campaign happen through the nonprofit over the next year. So part of this cost would go to hire a campaign manager, consultant for the capital campaign.
Mr. Storr?
Question for Ms. Monte. I think that there was McLean County. Did they not kind of put together something of this kind with industry partners?
I know McLean County is also trying to establish a household hazardous waste facility in their county. So they're one of 5. So far, it's Champaign County and McLean County that I'm aware of. McLean County has a nonprofit agency that they have designated to do this. It's sort of a similar kind of thing that would happen here.
Is there a plan for a location or a rough build-out cost or?
Yeah, I have provided those estimates. I've talked with a broker, local broker, who's advised me that this kind of real estate is not easy to come by, so the sooner we get started, the better. And I've provided those initial estimates on page 139 of the packet. Actually, on 137.
I would also just like to mention to the board that another idea has occurred as I'm watching through this, that depending on where the location of this would be sited, potentially it would be an unincorporated part of the county. And if that were the case, a big cost that's associated with this budget is $100,000 for fees, which potentially permitting fees and things could be potentially waived by the county if it were located in county property. So Just a thought.
Also, I would mention this site would also serve as the program collection site for the residential electronics collections that occur. And that's done currently also in McLean County already, and works pretty well. It's absorbed into a public works department there, but we would not be working with a local government to do that. We would operate independently with operational support funds from local governments.
So I'm going to, if we want to just hold these last 4 items for a while, that's fine. If we want to make a decision tonight, Stephanie's correct. There's about $2 million that's unallocated. So we need to make decisions. If you want to do them one at a time, that's fine. But if you want to consider, we haven't talked about the other two who don't have people here tonight to talk about them, but you did get that information at a previous meeting. So if we can do whatever you like, I can move forward or not move forward. We can consider it again at another meeting.
Can, this is, again, just a suggestion, and I want to be clear, like, I'm trying my best to figure out how to do all of this, and like, so I get a lot of like, we shouldn't do it like this, but then I don't get a lot of like, actionable, like, I'm just a board member like everybody else. If y'all got better ideas, then do them. Like, okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. I would like to suggest that maybe on these two, because they've been at ELOC now for a while, like quite a long while, maybe we just do like a straw poll and just go around the circle and everybody on the board says where they're at for the cover crop and the recycling facility. And then maybe the other two, I sense the energy in the room lagging. The people aren't here for those. We just heard them last time. They're pretty big asks, and they're complex asks. Is that?
Let's do, I think that's a good idea. Let's just go around the room and see if people want to make comments or suggestions for amounts or whatever about either of the first two projects, or if you want to hold, just go around and say what your thoughts are.
Okay. All right. I support the cover crop proposal as it's written. For the recycling proposal, I support it as it's written. And I think both should come out of the $2 million allocation that's just sitting there. And then I think we stop taking proposals and leave the other $1 million for in case county projects go over.
Well, we know where I stand on the cover crop. I think it's a needed program. I wish it was a common practice. I'll say one more time because they've heard it in ELOC 1,000 times. I spent a lot of time overseas. There isn't brown fields overseas when I drive around. They're green. They're green all winter. They use forage beets. It's not wheat. They'll put in grasses. They'll put in PBO and till it up in the spring. And it's just common practice there. And here it seems to not be common practice. And we're incentivizing people to do something that would, we could have started this a long time ago. I think it should be a federal program. Yeah, I agree with the Farm Bureau on that. The household hazardous waste, which would also fold in the electronic recycling, I think is a program I would be in support of, and I would not be unhappy to see some of that $2 million go towards that. Again, that's a thing that 20 years down the road we can put our hands on. We used to have one in Champaign, down on Market Street, that you could take things to, and it went away, and I don't know why. It was early on in my residency here, so I would support that one.
I feel like cover crops have been a settled science since at least the 90s, if not the Dust Bowl, if not. Sorry. I feel like cover crops are a settled science and have been for a while. I feel like the knowledge of those have been around since at least the Dust Bowl, if not hundreds of years beforehand. Brownfields seem to be a relatively recent, historically speaking, convention. I think the benefits are pretty evident. And I don't see where more education, because there have been cover crop education programs several times in the history of this county. So I don't really see what more education is going to accomplish. I really don't see what paying people for 2 years is going to accomplish. The information is out there. The research is out there. So I feel like this is just repeating the same thing and expecting different results. If people want to fund this, if people want to do this, they're doing it regardless. I don't think paying people for 2 years is really going to accomplish a whole lot. So my vote on that would be no. As far as the environmental stewardship proposal, yeah, I again agree with Eric. I remember when we had that recycling center, and I went there several times, and it was quite handy. And I would really appreciate having something like that in town again. And especially if they're doing the electronic recycling, because I don't know if you guys have ever tried to get into the electronic recycling. Those spots go like in less than 12 hours, and there is always a line of cars the whole time those guys are running. It is insane. There's obviously a huge demand for at least that. Never mind, the paint and the oil and everything else that people tend to dump into the sewers if they can't get somewhere to get rid of it. So I am absolutely in favor of that.
I'm tired and I'm hungry, so I'm going to be quick. If I had to vote on the cover crops right now at this precise minute, I would vote no. But I have a whole page of information that I want to get, so that might change. I am fully in support of the steward proposal. Thank you.
I'm very fascinated with the farmers. I mean, I never have in my life, which is just so ironic to me. I would support this. I would also support CCES. I would support both of them. I did enjoy my tour. Grew up around gardens, but to be actually out in the fields, I kind of got a calming to my spirit that I liked. And I want to know more about farming. So hopefully some of my fellow, county board members could take me out sometime. So I'll be interested in supporting both.
I think I have to echo what Leah said, at least the second part. Not so much tired and hungry, but I would have to vote no if I was expected to vote right now on the cover crop initiative, just because I do have a lot of questions, and I do, like Beth said too, I feel like a lot of this has already been covered. I think the recycling program is looking even more attractive to me now that there is federal support.
Thank you. I would support the cover crop experimental and promotional initiative, and also the household hazardous waste collection. Are we being asked to speak to the Promise Healthcare? No. Okay, pass.
I'm in the Leah and Jenny camp. As of right now, my vote is no on cover crops. That could change. Yes, I am in support of the electronic recycling. CCES.
At this time, I would certainly support the cover crop portion. As far as the recycling proposal, household hazardous waste, I think it's mostly a question of the dollar amount that we agree to put forward. Thank you.
Well, I don't know too
much about farming myself, but I do know that we need to try to prevent the erosion of our soil out there in the county. And I also know that the Farm Bureau should be doing this anyway, since they are receiving funds, for farming and stuff like that from the government. I also support the household hazardous waste project, because I know that people don't have any way of disposing of things like TVs and stuff, because in my neighborhood I see there's a TV on one of the sidewalks that people have put out. So I'm going to support that, I know. But I have to know a little bit more about this ground cover project.
I'd be in favor of the cover crops. Try and make this real quick. The idea, Mr. Thorson's saying he sees the green fields over in Europe. I guess my question would be, are they getting subsidized to do that? And until we know how much they're getting subsidized, to me, it's not really, if they are and to what degree, it's not necessarily comparing apples to apples. And I just did, sitting here, a quick Google search with the wording, are there incentives for cover crops in the UK, not just Europe in general, but I just limited it to the UK. And one of the first articles that came up from this 2nd of December 2021, so that was this last winter. It hasn't had time to take effect yet. It's from the BBC.com. New plan to pay farmers who protect winter soil is the title of the article. So, I mean, they're working on subsidizing their farmers, at least over there. So that's just a point to make. And then as far as the household hazardous waste, I question whether it's enough money. But again, at this point in time, if we're going to move forward at all, I'd be in favor of the way it's written. Have to start somewhere.
I'll be a yes on both issues. Being a farmer here, I have not used cover crop yet, but it's something I've been interested in. I know it's the expense of it. It's just something I haven't done yet. I have a few neighbors doing small patches of it, experimenting with it, so I think it's a good thing. As we all sit here, we hear me? I'm back live. Yeah. Yeah. But yes, and on the hazardous waste material, as Mr. Storr, and I admire you for this. The other piece of a jewel for us, besides prime farm ground, is we have an aquifer that has a reliable source of water that we need to maintain. Thank you for attending all those meetings, Mr. Storr.
I think you know where I stand on cover crops. I support it. CCES, my biggest concern, I'll support it. My biggest concern is the other side of the fundraising and then finding the site. I'm in real estate. I know what the prices have done, and I'm concerned about what it'll cost. But as Dr. Furtado said, if we don't get started, it ain't gonna happen. So let's get started.
I'm in favor of the cover crop proposal. I am not able to vote on the recycle. I am on the board of the Champaign County Environmental Stewards.
I see both these issues as environmental issues. I think they're equally important. I think it's terribly inconsistent to support one and not the other. I do support both. If you claim to be interested in preserving our environment for future generations, I think that you should be a yes vote on both of these. I do share the same concerns. I think our previous facility failed because of financing. But to Lorraine's point, TVs do not naturally grow in our best prime farm ground. You can grow almost anything else, not a television. It does not go away. it's expensive to get rid of those, it's difficult, and so the easy button for some people is to dump it on the ground. I can't imagine what they're doing with paint and so forth as well. So, as I say, I think it's inconsistent to support one and not the other, because I see these both as critical environmental issues, and we are in the epicenter of the best farm ground. So, yes to both.
I will agree on both counts that some things are very difficult to get a hold of. There are places to get rid of electronic devices. Marcos oil can be taken to gas stations. The issue I might have with this is probably the same as other people have had, the cost, and it's not really a well-developed plan like some of the water drainage funding that we supported earlier. I'm not sure that we have really a location or a person actually running this the program to raise more money for this, and I'm concerned it won't complete on time, or other funding will be available to complete it. So, thank you.
As we creep up on 3 hours and on the last speaker, I don't think anybody cares what I have to say, other than yes, yes, and yes to both projects.
Thank you. It sounds like I am supposed to move forward with checking out both of these things and making some kind of negotiation. I would need to do it looks like neither one of them I need to do any further, like an IGA, so it would not need to do that, but it looks like there's support for both of them. There was a little bit of dissent for the first one, but not enough that I think it would make a difference with a full vote. So I think I'm going to proceed forward unless I hear major objection to not doing that. Yeah?
Not a major objection, just a
Okay.
quick, I really appreciated the format of going around and hearing everything that everybody had to say. Like Mr. Essery had taken the time to, Google something and found some information that I wasn't aware of. So I appreciated getting to learn more from everybody on both
Okay.
issues.
Okay. The last thing we need to do real quickly is, I guess what we've sort of agreed is that we're not going to consider the other two this evening, and that those will need to be brought back again, I guess, or do we just want to drop them for now until we get the second tranche of funds? Bring them back to the next meeting? Okay. Okay. And I see no further business. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.